February 21st in 2004, and we are continuing on with our interview. We're going to talk about when Daddy met Mom. Okay. Tell me about when did you meet Mom? How did you meet her? First off, where were you at?
Well, I had moved to California from Colorado. I was living with my grandmother at Redondo Beach, and my cousin Betty and her husband Hal lived next door to my grandmother. And the only job I could find right off the bat was working in a filling station, which didn't pay too much. And my cousin Betty's husband Hal, I guess he's my cousin too, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyhow, he worked for a rubber factory, and he heard about this job opening at this little rubber factory. So I went down and applied, and they hired me. And it was 4 guys that went in partnership that are going to make parts out of rubber for the aircraft industry. And they were working in a 4-car garage in the back of one of these owners' yard. And they had this little miniature rubber plant set up in it there, a little boiler for steam and the presses to mold the stuff. Anyhow, I was their first employee, and they taught me to do every job in the plant. So whenever one of them wanted to take a break, because the 4 of them were doing the work, and they just wanted me to fill in so they could take a break, a day off once in a while, you know. And it turned out, it was a great opportunity because I learned from the very beginning everything that there is about rubber, you know. And as they grew, the business took off. I mean, we got to the point where we couldn't keep up with it. And so they finally purchased several lots on Slauson Avenue, on Gage Avenue, just south of Slauson, in the industrial side, the east side of L.A. And they contracted to put in a big building there, and they started building this factory from scratch. And it took all their savings from all 4 of them, plus what they'd been making for a year or two in this garage. And as we started expanding, they added to the garage. They put a little building added it onto the garage, and finally it ended up covering this whole lot. The house was moved, and they put a building there, and then of course they had this new big building started. And when they got more room, more expansion, then they hired more people. And your mother was hired to do as a payroll clerk.
Oh.
So she was doing the payroll, and I got promoted. I guess you call it promoted. They put me in charge of the night shift. And I think I had 7 or 8 people working for me. And because I knew every job in the factory, you know, so yeah. I could show these other people how to do all these other details. And so I would have to keep track of the time, all these employees that were working with me. They're on the night shift. And that's how I got in contact with your mother. I'd take the payroll into her once a week, and so she could write out checks for all these guys. And then one thing led to another. We started dating. And
who made the first move? Do you remember? Was she flirting with you, or were you flirting with her first?
No, it wasn't her. She was very... it's hard to believe, but as I recall, I think she was pretty shy.
Yeah?
Especially when it come to men.
Yeah.
And she also had a steady boyfriend.
Oh, really?
And I guess you'd call it that. He was a Hispanic kid and part of a gang, I think.
Oh, goodness.
They called them pachucos in those days. And these kids all they'd all go to a Ford coupe, Ford V8 coupe, no matter what year it was. But they would make hot rods out of them. They'd soup them up, and they'd paint them shiny and bright, you know. And of I guess they were a gang because a lot of people are scared to go out at night in that part
My
of town.
mother dated someone like that. Whoa.
And I think that was part of it with me. I thought, well, she doesn't need to be with a gang of hoodlums like that, you know.
Yeah.
'Cause she would never consider doing anything out of ordinary, you know.
Well,
out
because
of
she was
line.
so naive. That's probably why she went with this
Yeah,
guy.
she
'Cause
was
he,
just so.
he flattered her, and she was impressed by that.
And of course, in those days, our dates were maybe a movie once in a while, and I couldn't find anything that she liked to do that I liked to do. We'd go roller skating, and she'd always bring Emma along. And Emma and I go out and skate while Mary sit on the sidelines, you know.
Surprised you didn't marry Emma.
Yeah. Emma was just a little bitty girl at that time.
Yeah, little.
I think she was probably, what, 7th or 8th grade.
Oh, my. So how long did you and Mom date before you actually got married then?
Probably not more than a few months.
Yeah?
I don't remember for sure, but
Yeah.
when I got my draft notice, and the owners of this factory that I worked for, one of them in particular, he says, there's nothing to worry about. He says, you're in a, what do they call them, war essential business or something like that.
Your needs were in the rubber factory for the war.
Yeah,
You didn't need,
yeah,
they didn't, you
yeah.
were needed there more than in the war.
Yeah, they needed me to keep the factory going, to build more airplanes. So he says, and I had a date that I was supposed to report to the draft board. He says, I'll go with you to the draft board, and he says, we'll straighten these guys out. He did. They drafted me right on the spot. They didn't pay any attention to him. I found out later, though, that he was an alcoholic.
Oh.
And he was probably 2 sheets in the wind all the time, you know. I wouldn't listen to him either.
Oh, shoot.
But they drafted me, and I had a week's notice before I had to report, a week's leave, I guess you call it.
Yeah.
So when I told Mary about it, and that's when I told her, I said, well, let's get married because I'm gonna be gone.
Mm-hmm.
So she agreed, and we, I had at that time, it was in 1942, and I had a 1941 Dodge sedan. I bought it used, but it was brand new.
Wow.
I think I paid $700 for it, and it wasn't paid for either.
Yeah.
Anyhow, we were going to go to Las Vegas to get married then. And I had to get my mother to sign a release because I wasn't 21 yet. And she wouldn't go unless we'd take her dad with her. So her dad eloped with us to Las Vegas. He was one of the witnesses we had to sign for her. And when we come back, well, we just, she was living with her grandmother, so she just moved in with me at my grandmother's house. I just had a bedroom there. And a week later, I had to report to duty. I mean, just nothing. We didn't go anywhere or anything.
Yeah, yeah. And she stayed working at the rubber company while you were
She worked there.
in the war?
Because when I started out, they stationed me in Glendale. And I was able to, from Glendale, well, she moved back with her grandmother on Grand Avenue, just off Slauson. And she had her own bedroom there, so when I was stationed in Glendale, and they sent me to school there, to become an aircraft mechanic, and there's also a P-38 squadron based on this same field the school was in. So when I finished the schooling, they made me a crew chief on P-38, so I just go there every day to work and work on this P-38.
Mm-hmm.
And just like going to work every day. The only difference was instead of $400 or $500 a month, I was making $21 a month.
Oh my gosh.
And then they, I think I told you the story about how they wanted me to be a tail gunner, and so I managed to get out of that by taking a test, and I passed the test, so they were going to send me to flight school. And so they sent me to Grand Prairie. What's the name of that town in Texas? Grand Prairie, I think. Anyhow, I had to take basic training there. And so she followed me.
She followed you there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And every place I was stationed, though, she
Yeah.
moved
So
to.
did you just rent a little apartment or something?
We just rented a little apartment.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I didn't get. As a cadet, I got very few days off. I mean, it was work.
Yeah. Yeah. Did
That's
she get
all.
a job or?
She'd get a job every place we
Yeah.
went. Usually
Yeah.
a bookkeeping job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Apparently they were in great demand then. She never seemed to have trouble getting a job.
Yeah.
And she knows her stuff. I mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when I finally was moved to Colorado Springs, I was able to live off base then. We rented a little apartment there. And then from there, they was going to ship me overseas, so that's the time that she wouldn't fly home with me. We had to go home on a train because she was afraid to fly
Yeah.
with me.
Yeah. So
And
then where did she go then when you
She
got
went back
shipped
to-
overseas?
moved in with her grandmother again.
Was that Mommy? Monty?
Yeah,
Mommy? Yeah.
Bonnie. And then her Aunt Tensia, they
And
lived
Aunt
together.
Tensia and Uncle Angel.
Yeah, he lived with them too.
Yeah.
In fact, he just retired when I went overseas.
Yeah.
From
Yeah.
30 years in the Marines, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Master Sergeant.
Wow.
Tough Marine.
Yeah. So you went and did your 15 months or whatever overseas, and then you came home again. Now, what happened when you got home? Where did you go?
Well, they had according to the law, they had to give me a job back, but they welcomed me back to the rubber factory.
Yeah.
And I went back there as, I started working at different jobs again, where they needed me. They shift me around quite a bit, And finally they said, well, being as I had such intimate knowledge of the workings of the plant and everything, they made me what they call production control manager. And whenever a new order would come in from one of the aircraft factories, they always had a due date on it, and we could never keep up with them. Everybody wanted everything right now. But it was my job to follow that order through the plant, make sure it didn't get stopped in anything.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, I had working relationship with every purchasing agent in the West Coast, I think. All
Oh,
our
wow.
aircraft companies,
Yeah.
whenever they need to know about their parts, well, they'd all call me. And I try to give them truthful information to keep myself out of trouble, but also so.
Right. Right.
And they got to trust in my information, so when I got to that point where these guys were trusting me, well, then my bosses thought, well, hey, here's a way to make some more money, So they decided to make me a salesman, where I would call on all these purchasing agents on these aircraft factories.
Oh my goodness.
And I'd go out to Douglas or Consolidated, Vultee, or North American, and I knew all the purchasing agents, but I hated that kind of job. Because that's the kind of job where you had to, not always, but in many cases, the only way you'd get an order was to take these guys out and buy them
Yeah.
2 martini lunch,
Butter them all up
and butter them all up, and I didn't like that at all. And I was getting to the point where I was becoming an alcoholic, and it scared me. I didn't. So I asked if I could get back in my old production job again, and they gave it to me.
And they gave it back. Yeah.
And I worked there, and then in the meantime, Keith was sent to Korea, and he and I used to correspond with a wire recorder. You remember a wire recorder? And then when he come back from the Korean War, well, he and Wayne got together and were talking about moving to Alaska. They wanted to explore Alaska. And it sounded good to me, too, because I was ready to get out of that rat race. And they come up here. We actually, well, to back up a little bit, Keith, I don't think ever did have a decent, well-paying job. He was too young, I think, mainly. And he had no background, no training or anything. And I don't even remember what he was working at. stocking grocery shelves or something insignificant.
Mm-hmm.
And Wayne was driving a truck for Safeway, and he was hauling meat from packing house to the various Safeway stores in the Los Angeles area. And he and Vivian, I think they had Ronnie and Glenn at that time. Anyhow, they were not able to save a dime, so they come to me on this Alaska venture and they want some financial backing, And I thought, well, this is a great way I can help them because I could make money. I was making pretty good money.
Mm-hmm.
So they come up here. We had many full session, and we sat down and decided that we were going to spend all of the money in tools. We come up here and our goal was eventually to start a dairy farm where we could sell milk. In the meantime, we wanted to, according to literature we were reading, there's lots of timber here, so we were going to bring a sawmill, chainsaws, and all that kind of stuff, which we bought.
Out there? You bought it all out there?
Bought it all in Los Angeles area. And then we bought a surplus military truck. And first trip, that's all they had was this truck. And we loaded that truck up with a sawmill and a year's supply of food and everything imaginable. The thing was just overloaded, terrible. And Wayne and Keith came up here then to scout around, locate some land and everything. Mm-hmm. And that's the summer, and I stayed back there and was working.
So was that like in 53, maybe?
It was probably in 52, even earlier.
Yeah.
Because they come up here and they got involved with I don't know. Do you remember Mr. E from Vanilchik?
Mr. Who?
E.
Mr. E.
Anselewski.
Mm-hmm.
Remember him?
Uh-huh.
Little roly-poly, chubby guy.
I don't remember what he looks like, but I remember the name.
Well, anyhow, he introduced him to a guy, to Goggins.
To Goggins?
And this Goggins was a real promoter, and he had his eyeball on all that equipment we brought up, and it was probably $3,000 or $4,000 worth of equipment there, Mm. And so he talked him into trading that sawmill and chainsaws and axes, you name it, all this equipment, in exchange for 40 acres. He says, I got 40 acres and with a little cabin on it, and he says, I'll trade you that 40 acres and a cabin for this equipment. And so Wayne and Keith thought, this is a good deal here. They got some free land, and they could see that the equipment wasn't that, we could replace it pretty easy, where it would be very difficult to get land in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
So they agreed to this, and Goggins wrote them out a bill of sale and everything, description of the land, and Wayne and Keith flew home. They left the truck and everything with this guy Goggins. So they come back all excited about how they had 40 acres up there. All we had to do was buy another sawmill and some more equipment, so sounded good, So we started all over again, and we got another sawmill, and we made some improvements on the type of equipment we got this time. And this time we bought, in addition to a surplus truck, we also bought a military surplus Jeep. And when we got the sawmill and equipment, it all started piling up at Wayne's house. And then we decided that we needed to be able to do all of our own mechanical work, because there was no place in the immediate area that did that kind of thing, So we even bought a welder, and I learned to weld in my garage, and I welded up a tow bar for the Jeep so we could pull it behind the truck. And we were very busy for a year or two getting everything all organized. And then this time, Wayne couldn't go because I think Vivian was pregnant with Cindy.
Cindy was born up here.
Cindy was born up here.
Yeah, so it would have had to have been
Maybe it was
Glenn.
Glenn then. Anyhow, he didn't want to go, and he got a promotion in his job. He was making more money than I was making actually. He couldn't say it, but
Yeah.
But anyhow, so we determined that Keith and I would come up then. In the meantime, we put our house up for sale. Your mother took care of that. She sold the house, and we had new furniture, and she sold all that, or gave it away or whatever. And then she moved back into town. I think she...
We moved in with Bert and Emma, didn't
Bert
we?
and Emma, I
yeah,
think.
yeah, back in our old house. Because they were living in our house.
Yeah, in our old house.
In our old house.
On 91st Street.
Yeah, so then we moved back with them again.
Dean was born then too, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a little tiny house.
Yeah, yeah. We all lived there.
They had 3 and you had 3.
Yeah.
6 of you in that little house.
Yeah, yeah. But it wasn't that long, I don't think. So.
No.
Yeah. So
Anyway, we got back up, Keith and I got back up here, and we had some real adventures on that highway.
Oh, well, tell us about them.
As we were overloaded. This truck we bought was, this one we had the big airplane tires on.
Yeah.
That International, and it was only a 1.5 ton truck, and I think we had 5 ton on the back of the thing.
Yeeks.
Towing a Jeep behind us, and we come up over the highway during breakup. And the Alaska Highway at that time wasn't even all gravel. Some of it was just dirt. And during breakup, it was impossible. And of course, this truck we bought, we knew that we might get into that, so we bought one with a winch on it.
Mm-hmm.
And we put dual tires on it. We bought all kinds of extra tires. In fact, we went down the tires we put on this truck because we're so overloaded. I think we went down and bought surplus aircraft tires, and normally a truck tire at that time was 6 or 8 ply, and these aircraft tires we bought were 16 ply. They were so stiff.
Good grief.
We had an awful time getting them mounted and everything. And anyhow, coming on up over the highway then...
Do you remember what time of year it was?
Yeah, it was...
breakup, you said, so it would have been like...
Well, we were
May
6 weeks on that highway. And we got to Nanilchik on the 6th of June, on your mother's birthday.
Okay, she must have left in the first part of May then.
Probably even earlier than that. Probably in the middle of April.
Yeah.
I remember one place on the Canadian highway, Alaska highway. There was a stretch there about a mile long that was nothing but mud. And there was a lot of trees along the edge of the road and everything. And we spent about a week doing nothing but winching ourselves through these mud holes. And
How far did you get?
we got through them all.
Yeah?
But
Are you looking like a couple of miles or 50 miles? Or?
Oh, well, this one bad stretch was probably only a couple miles long.
Yeah.
And then we got onto higher ground, just like it was crossing a muskeg or something.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, okay.
When we got back on higher ground, they had a little bit of gravel on that section of the road then. It was pretty good going, but it was very dusty and dirty. And there were a lot of hills, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And this old truck was so loaded that, but we ended up burning out the engine, knocking a rod out of the engine. Just sitting there, knock, just about to fly to pieces. So we pulled in this gravel pit and camped, set up camp. We had a tent with us and a gasoline stove, what do you call them?
What kind of food?
Coleman stove.
What kind of food did you take? Sea rations? Or
No,
did you
no,
take
we wouldn't have.
canned?
We had cases of canned goods, tomatoes, peaches,
Yeah.
you name it.
Yeah.
And we had, several hundred pounds of flour, cornmeal, salt pork, salt bacon, bacon, that was salted instead of smoked.
Yeah.
And anyhow, we had all this food in the truck, so food was no problem.
Yeah.
We pulled in this gravel pit though, and we proceeded to strip the engine, took the engine out of that truck. We made a tripod out of poles that we cut.
You got pictures of that, I think.
I got pictures of that. and we knew it was a bad rod. We knocked the rod out, so we still had the Jeep to run, and we was at this little place near called Sexsmith, and it was I don't know how, it was about halfway up the highway. But anyhow, I took the crankshaft and a bad rod, and we didn't have no money. We were broke, and I think we had about $100 between us all. But I took the Jeep and the crankshaft and started up the road to this little town called Sexsmith, and I didn't have any idea what I was going to find there. There happened to be no garage in town, no mechanics, but I did find a blacksmith shop. And I remember going in there, talking to this old blacksmith, and showed him my problem and everything. I said, "You don't know where I could send this crankshaft to have it ground down, so, and then have a new Babbitt rod bearing poured." And he says, "Well," he says, "I could probably do that." He says, "I know I can turn the crankshaft." And he says, "I never poured a Babbitt rod, but he says, I do have some Babbitt here." So we did. And he says, "Can you give me a day or two to get it done?" And I went back 2 days later, and he had it all finished. He says, "Well," he says, "I hate to do this to you, but," he says, "I'm going to have to charge you $20 for that." We happened to have it.
Phew.
We went back and put it together again, and of course we babied that truck very much. We didn't lug it down or anything.
Yeah.
In fact, we quit towing the Jeep, and Keith drove the truck and I drove the Jeep.
Uh-huh.
And we transferred a lot of the weight out of the truck into the back of the Jeep, so
Yeah.
it was overloaded
Yeah.
too. But we just poked along. Our top speed was not over 15 or 20 miles an
Oh
hour.
my God, so you probably did you drive like 12, 14 hours a day?
12, 14 hours a day,
Yeah.
and it was dusty and
Yeah.
dirty and miserable.
Oh, goodness.
It was not a fun trip.
So you're thinking it was about 6 weeks to get to Alaska, huh?
Yeah, it took us 6 weeks on that.
Oh my gosh.
That's why it took so long.
Yeah.
Of course, when we got to Anchorage then, well, the road had just been opened the previous year to the Kenai Peninsula.
Oh.
And there was just going over the pass towards Seward. There was no gravel on the road. It was just the bulldozed out, and there's these big boulders and rocks and everything. You know? And we just creeped over that part of it because we didn't want to blow out any more tires.
Really? Yeah.
It was real hard on tires. And coming down around Cooper Landing, at that time, it was a one-lane road. If you met another car, one of you had to back up till you found a white spot so you could pass each other. And the mountain was on one side and the river was on the other side. And the bridges were across the Kenai River along Cooper Landing there were all covered. They built covered bridges. Keep the snow off them.
I'll be darned.
So in the wintertime they didn't have to get on it with the bulldozers
Yeah.
and all the snow.
Yeah.
In fact, they were so flimsy they probably broke through.
Probably wasn't anything in Cooper Landing, was there, building-wise?
No, there's
it
no
was
buildings,
just nothing.
nothing there.
Huh.
And then here again, I think it took us 3 days to come from Anchorage down to
The hill.
Manilchik.
Wow. So what was your first impression then when you got to the Nilchik and went there?
Well,
How'd you
first,
find Goggins' cabin?
Well, Ensileski, Dean knew where it was. And we stopped in Ensileski. He welcomed Dean like an old friend, you know.
Yeah. Well,
Or
Keith.
Keith, not
Keith.
Dean. And I got to like the guy too. He was just a friendly old guy. you
Yeah.
know. Of course, an old guy. He's probably in his 40s.
Yeah.
And Keith and I then we set up camp just off the road and hiked into Goggins' cabin, and we unloaded the Jeep and the truck and everything we could carry and packed it in from the. Well, I don't know if you remember or not, but that's the way we took you to meet the school bus
Yeah.
on that little trail.
On the little trail. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Keith and I made that trail when we first arrived there. And there was a little creek, Happy Valley Creek, that we had to jump across. And
Yeah.
you jump across it, that's where I strapped my camera broke jumping across, and I dropped my camera in the water.
And you have all the wet pictures.
Got all those wet pictures.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So what did the cabin look like when you got there? Was it disastrous?
it looked good to us.
Yeah?
After being camping out for all these weeks, but there's no chinking in the logs. You can look through the thing anywhere.
Yeah.
And of course, we weren't figuring on spending the winter there. We were going to get our sawmill set up and have a real house by winter. Boy, talk about naive and dreamers.
Yeah, yeah.
And the first thing we had to do then was locate some land. But then first thing we had to do after that, though, before that, though, we had to make a trail into the Goggins cabin so we could get that truck in there with all their stuff
Built
in
some
it.
sort of a driveway.
So
Right.
Keith and I spent about, I don't know, probably most of the summer with the Jeep, and we found a rear end from some kind of an old car that had tires on it, and we fixed the tires and made a little two-wheel trailer to pull behind the Jeep.
Mm.
And we'd go down the gravel pit then, and we'd cut a trail with a chainsaw and shovel and pick and axe and everything down to the highway, so we didn't have to cross a creek and build a bridge.
Yeah.
And it's probably about 1.5 miles long, but there's some springs in the road, and even at the Jeep we couldn't always get through it.
Mm-hmm.
So we started sawing logs and corduroying the real wet spots, and we lay logs in the road, and then we take the Jeep and this little trailer we made, go down the gravel pit and shovel in by hand probably half a ton of gravel and drive up that trail and dump it on the logs and go back and get them out. But we hand built that road into his cabin.
Wow. For about a mile? It was about a mile in?
About a mile.
Wow.
Maybe a little more.
A little mile and a half? Wow. Didn't realize it was so far in.
But we did get the truck in there before fall.
Mm-hmm.
And that fall, that's when we met, that summer we met Denny Bell and Al Sandburn. Remember Al Sandburn?
Yeah. Home prospector.
Denny Bell talked us into going in with him and getting our winter supply of coal. And we knew we were going to have to spend the winter in that cabin because there's no way we could build a house.
Because you were still planning on Mom and Dean and I coming up then.
Which you did.
Yeah. But we weren't there yet, right?
You weren't there yet.
Okay.
So we took the truck and we unloaded everything. It had a box on the back of the truck which we had made, and we took that off and set it on the ground, and then we stored everything in this box to keep the snow and water off of it. There's a tin I don't know, maybe you remember the tin shed at the homestead, out by the garage.
At Goggins cabin?
No, after we homesteaded
at an Anchor
in
Point
Anchor
homestead.
Point.
Yeah, okay, I remember that.
Well, that little tin shed thing was what was on the back of our truck when we come up over the highway.
Oh, okay.
So we unloaded that at Goggins cabin, took it off the truck, and then we stored everything in that, so we had a base of operations. And then we'd take our truck then with Denny, we went down to the beach. We made a flat bed on the back of the truck, and we made a boom for it, and we had a winch on the back of that truck as well as one on the front. And we'd go down on the beach and we'd pick up these big chunks of coal, maybe 4 foot square,
Wow.
2 or 3 foot thick, We'd load them on. Denny had a tractor with a trailer too, and we'd pick up these big chunks of coal and set them on his trailer, and we'd sit them on the back of our truck. Anyhow, we worked with Denny, and I think it took us about 3 tides, but we got both of them, winter coal for both places. One time we even tried parking the truck up on top of the bluff, and we run a big cable over the edge of the bluff, and we tie the coal onto the cable, and we'd winch it up over the bluff, so we didn't have to drive all the way down the Nilchik.
And back down the beach. Did that work very well?
That didn't work.
That didn't work very well.
No, we didn't have enough cable, and the drum. When we did have enough cable to reach the bottom, and the drum on the truck, it was too big; it wouldn't hold
yeah,
it all.
yeah.
So then we had to hook his tractor on the back of the truck, and a four-wheel drive truck, we'd back up, and he'd pull us with a tractor, and we'd drag that coal up over the edge. Oh, that was a mess. We learned a lot from Denny, though.
Yeah, yeah, thank goodness for Denny. Well, he was a close neighbor.
Yeah.
And Sanborn lived out there by Goggins, didn't he?
Yeah, right
Yeah.
down the
Yeah.
trail. And we learned a lot from him, too. We learned how to poach moose all winter.
Yeah, yeah. What was it like the first time you shot a moose? I mean, do you remember hunting?
Yeah, I never did get a kick out of shooting a
No,
moose. But,
no.
between Sanborn and Denny and us, I think the first winter we were there, the three families got by on 2 moose.
Yeah.
Winter.
Wow.
And when we get a moose, or whoever would see one, we'd all get together and know when we were low on meat,
Mm-hmm.
and whoever had spotted the moose that was in the right place and everything, well, and usually it was Sanborn that killed him,
Yeah.
and he'd make sure they were under a big tree or something. So we thought we were really being smart, you know. And this moose, when we butchered it under a tree, we'd take a chainsaw and cut the tree down and try to put it over the gut pile, or we cut branches and pile on top of the hide and the guts, and then we'd shovel snow on top of that to hide it from the airplane, from fishing game.
Oh.
And of course, 2 days later, the ravens and the magpies had it all spread out everywhere. You know, the ground was just bright red everywhere. I know they knew what was going on.
Yeah, I never did get ticketed though, huh?
I don't think they particularly cared in those days.
No,
It wasn't that we were.
Yeah, it wasn't that big of a deal
Wasn't
then.
that big a deal.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, back to getting Goggins cabin ready for your family to come up. When you went into the cabin, was it, I mean, you said it was no chinks, so you had to re-chink all the logs? And
Yeah, it had
Did
moss in
Yeah.
the cracks.
Did it already have the beds all built in and the big stove and all of that? Or
No, we had
you
to put that in there.
You had to get
Yeah.
all that? Remember that monstrous black stove
Yeah.
that you...
That was one thing. No, I guess it was there.
Yeah.
That was there because we couldn't move that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. That was really a lifesaver though.
Yeah.
But we couldn't find the moss. That was too slow a process to
Yeah.
pick moss, you know, and chink those cracks. All we really needed was some cement, which we couldn't afford to buy.
Yeah.
So I ended up taking all of our clothes that were kind of ragged and
Stuffing clothes.
stuffing them in and
Yeah.
poking them in the cracks. And we chinked them all up the best we could, but even so, in the wintertime, you could feel the air coming through all
Yeah.
those cracks. And that was the first winter.
Well, before we came up, because Dean and Mom and I came up in September, where did Keith go?
Keith went back home to go to work. Oh, Keith had hurt his back. No, I guess he did hurt his back.
Because Wayne wasn't there, right? He was
No,
still
Wayne
out?
wasn't there.
Okay.
I think Keith had to go back and he had surgery on his back. They
Yeah.
fused his two vertebrae together. Can't remember how he hurt it or when. He probably hurt it in that long drive up in that truck. It just about wiped him out. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he went back, and your mother and you and Dean come up then, and we spent the winter in Goggins cabin.
Do you remember how I can remember the plane trip coming up. I can remember Mom took us all down and we bought all these heavy winter clothes and little slipper socks and furry coats and mittens and hats and all this stuff. And I can remember flying up on PNA with 2 propellers and I think we landed in Kodiak first and then came to Homer.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you come to Homer to pick us up in, the Jeep?
Jeep.
Yeah.
Oh, we had.
Yeah.
I don't know, that must have been quite a shock for your brother.
Yeah.
After.
Well, the plane ride was extremely exciting. But I don't remember once we landed in Homer, the trip between there and Goggins cabin. I don't remember that part
It
of
was
it.
a pretty rough road. I mean, there was gravel road and there was washboards and so rough you couldn't talk to one another, you know.
Yeah.
Open Jeep.
Dusty.
And thank goodness it wasn't too cold. I
Yeah.
remember when he came in, it was kind of a cloudy day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Wow.
Well, you guys were so excited.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't think you'd been there a day or two. We had a little snow.
Yeah.
And Dean couldn't wait to get out and build a snowman.
Build a
We got a
snowman.
picture of his first snowman.
Yeah. Yeah. And having to use the outhouse, that must have been a culture shock for Mom.
Oh, I'm sure it
Little
was.
city girl. And
She, in fact, she insisted that we have an outhouse.
yeah.
Of course, Keith and I never used one. We just went behind a tree somewhere.
Yeah. 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 So we managed to survive that winter anyway. When did Wayne and Minnie and all of them come back up again then, do you
Well,
remember?
Minnie came up first.
But you must have by that time had the home site in Ninilchik then, in town. No, we had the other little house in the back.
We had the homestead.
Beyond.
That we filed on a homestead for me, and Keith and Wayne were going to file later.
I see.
And we went back and started to set up the sawmill.
Okay, now we had 40 acres, right? That.
We had 160 acres.
Okay. Okay.
And we were back on the edge of a ridge that bordered a huge, big muskeg behind us. And it had some good, big timber on it. That's the reason we filed on it.
Mm-hmm.
And we started out, and we decided that if we're going to start a dairy, so we needed to clear the stumps and everything so we could plow this ground so we could plant grass.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Boy, talk about ambitious. So, in order to make it easier to get rid of the stumps, we decided that we'd take the winch on the truck and we'd pull the trees over rather than cut them off.
Mm-hmm.
That way the stumps would be laying exposed, and the rain and stuff would wash the dirt off
Right.
and make it easier to dispose of the stumps. And of course the trees are on the ground, so we just go cut them up with a chainsaw and haul them to the sawmill.
Mm-hmm.
And that worked fine, except it was a slow process.
Yeah.
Of course, it wouldn't have been any quicker to cut the trees down either,
Yeah.
because still had to work around the stumps.
Yeah. Yeah. But you never did get a very big clearing, did you?
No. It was heavy timber.
Yeah.
I mean,
So what happened? I remember the little house. We moved out of Goggins and we moved into the other little house, all of us and Minnie in this little tiny house
well,
back there. And how long did we live there?
one winter.
One winter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did Dean and I, well, Dean was before school, but did you guys take me clear out to school, or did I?
Yeah,
I must have gone to
we
school.
took you out to school.
Yeah.
We had a trail from Goggins past Kingsley's to our homestead.
Yeah.
And the same old toboggan that I made to haul you to school from Goggins, well, I went the whole route and
Yeah.
just increased the length of the trail by about a mile each way.
Yeah, my goodness. Because that little cabin was, what, a couple of miles back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, by road it was, but by our trail it was. We did a lot of shortcuts across
Yeah.
the muskegs.
Yeah.
We couldn't drive across.
Mm.
And
You remember pulling me on the sled out to the school bus?
yeah, I
Wow.
rigged up a harness for myself and my snowshoes. You rode the sled.
Oh.
The moose in the trail, we'd pull off the ride on the side and let him go by, and then we'd get back on the trail again.
I can't remember that. I can remember being terrified coming home when the bus came home early, and the little telephone at the end of the road where the bus driver would go crank, 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 crank. Gotta come get Terry. So by the time the bus came back again, they'd drop me off. But I don't remember you actually pulling me out to the bus stop.
Yeah, I remember that too.
Yeah.
That little telephone was a lifesaver, you know.
Yeah.
Military surplus.
Do you remember where we did our shopping? Our grocery shopping? Did we go to Ninilchik or Homer? Or?
We went to Ninilchik for small items, and we come to Homer whenever we. See, the problem was we had no money,
Yeah, really.
and what was it? Keith went to work, and between him and Wayne, they tried to send us about $20 a month.
Wow.
Some months we'd get it, and some months we wouldn't. But whenever we got any money at all, we'd drive to Homer then. And I don't know if you remember a guy Rosie had a grocery store out on East Road.
Mickey's Market?
Mickey's Market. Mickey Rosie. We'd go out there and get bulk. We'd buy everything but a case that we could. We'd get a case of corn, a case of, and of course when we didn't have no money, well, couldn't go there. And mainly we had all this stuff that we hauled up over the highway that we lived on.
Thank goodness for that then.
And we had I don't know, 200-300 pound bags of beans and cornmeal, flour, powdered milk.
We planted potatoes and stuff, do you remember?
We planted potatoes in Al Sanborn, in order to clear up on his homestead, had hired Wayne Jones to come in and push over some trees. And then Denny come in with his tractor and plow, and he plowed up an acre or so. So we went in, the three of us went in together, and we planted about an acre of potatoes there. And we never even considered putting in a root cellar first, you know.
Yeah.
But when it come time to dig our potatoes, well, we took them all home with us and put them under our bed in the bedroom, this little shed. This thing we built was supposedly would end up as the porch of our house. We were going to build a house there. So we built the porch first because that's what we had time for, and we sold the lumber we had. Because I couldn't saw it and cut the trees down and cut the lumber and get enough ahead to build a house, so that takes a lot of lumber. So we piled all of the potatoes, and Minnie was with us then too. We put all the potatoes under the bed in this little shack, and during the winter they froze. And when they thawed, what a stinking rotten mess. Oh, that was a real lesson.
Bad news. Well, I can remember the little table. I think wasn't it on hinges or something? Because it was so tiny in the little kitchen area that we had to
fold it up
against the wall. We sat on Blazo boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was kind of an interesting.
Yeah, that was.
I don't think we're any the worse for it, but
yeah, quite
I don't
an
think it's
experience.
something you'd want to repeat either.
Yeah. Do we have very many pictures of that particular little cabin? Do you remember?
Not too many.
Not too many. I could just remember a few.
I couldn't afford film.
Yeah. Well.
And my camera got damaged too when I dropped it in the creek.
Yeah.
It rusted up quite a bit. And I finally got up enough money sometime to take it to a camera shop, and the guy took it apart and oiled it for me. But I could never get the focus to work right again.
Yeah,
after
to work
that.
right again. Yeah. Huh. Well, we were then actually in Goggins and then the other little cabin from 1954.
We spent one winter at Goggins and the next winter in that little shack.
Okay, 55
and
winters.
it was such a chore to get you guys to the bus. And Dean started school the next year, I think. We went and applied for that lot in the Nilchik.
Yeah.
And we it's called a home site lot. We got this home site lot, and then I got enough lumber ahead to build another little shack in there.
Now we had to give up the other 160 acres?
We didn't have to, but we eventually did.
Did you just give it back then, or did you sell it, or?
No, we gave it back because we relinquished it back to the state and refiled on the place out in Anchor Point.
In Anchor Point, okay.
Because we come to the conclusion that our plan of cutting down those trees and clearing the land and planting grass to it would never work.
Never worked.
I mean, we couldn't live long enough to do all that.
Right.
So when we come to that realization, then we decided we needed land without any trees.
Yeah.
So that's when we went up.
So what was your decision to move to do the home site in Nilchik? Because that was way before you'd thought about Anchor Point, wasn't it?
Well, the reason was so you kids could get to school easier.
Uh-huh.
And of course, it was right across the street from the schoolhouse.
Yeah. Now, how big a site was it? Because Wayne and Nenny and Keith all had some property back there too, didn't they?
Yeah. That's the one that you guys have now, that Stan has.
Oh, right.
That's
Is that all? We were all on the same piece of property then? Was it like?
No, that was just mine.
Okay, that was just
and
yours.
Wayne had a.
He filed for a home site.
A home site back behind us.
Where,
And Keith didn't, and Ninny didn't. They just,
they just stayed
with Wayne.
on Wayne's.
Yeah.
Okay.
We built and that, at that time, Wayne was working for the cannery. Russ Burleson had a cannery at Nanilchik, and Wayne was working for them as a mechanic.
Mm.
And we had, he had a fleet of, I think 6x6 military surplus trucks that he'd drive up and down the beach to pick up fish from the set netters.
Mm.
And it took a lot of maintenance because that salt water used to be, it was hard on them.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than work out in the open, which we didn't have a garage or anything, so we built a big garage on Wayne's property, his home site lot, so we could bring those trucks in and work on them out of the weather.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was we'd get them all overhauled during the wintertime so that in the summertime they'd be ready to go again,
Mm-hmm.
which we did for several years.
Now, you went ahead and you and Wayne went into business together mechanicking? Is that what you did for income, or
Yeah.
were you working somewhere else?
Well,
then?
Wayne worked for him, and I just pitched in and helped.
Did you get paid?
No. Well, Wayne got paid.
Wayne got paid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he couldn't keep up by itself. It was
Mhm.
just too much work. And along about the same time then, I relinquished my homestead, and we went out to Anchor Point, and we, I don't know if you remember where Colonel Boyer lived.
Mm-hmm.
The road ended there.
We what?
The road ended there.
At Boyer's?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And we, I remember when we were looking for more homesteads, we parked our vehicles there at Boyer's at the end of the road, and we snowshoed all the way up to the knob. And we had a compass and tape measure and sleeping bags and camping gear, everything. And we, Wayne, Keith and I camped out there for a week, or maybe a little longer even, and we surveyed and laid out 4 homesteads up there, all on
Wow.
snowshoes.
Wow.
And we marked them all with surveyor tapes, where the corners were and everything. And then next spring we went out and after breakup, and we probably weren't off more than 10 or 15 feet of the original section marking.
I'll be darned.
We were able to locate everything accurately then in the summertime.
That's pretty
It
amazing.
was amazing.
Yeah.
It was actually, it's pretty easy though if you have any idea what you're doing, because there are compasses. We knew, according to the latest geophysical maps, that we had to allow 26 degrees deviation. In other words, magnetic north was 26 degrees off from true north.
Yeah.
And the maps told you this.
Yeah.
So instead of looking at north, we look at 26.
Uh-huh.
And then we'd be going straight north.
Then you knew that you were going to go find a...
And we had a 100-foot tape measure and some sticks, and we'd stick a stick in the snow, and one guy would guide the other guys on a straight line.
Uh-huh.
And when we come to 1,320 feet, that was a quarter of a mile.
Uh-huh.
And there should be a marker here somewhere, so we'd stick a stick in the ground and tie all kinds of flags on it. And next spring we know it would be close in that area.
Yeah.
And we went back and found them.
And we actually found them.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we're pretty proud of that.
Yeah. Good grief. When did you work? When we were still in the Nilchik, though, is when you got a job with Homer Electric, wasn't it? Or was it after you
Yeah,
came to the
no,
house?
it was there. The first winter in the Nilchik, I went to work for Mel Jackson, and he had the garage back in Selesky's store.
Mm-hmm.
And just as a mechanic, we were working on boat engines or automobiles or whatever come in. And that Mel was quite a shyster. He didn't have any money. And he says, we'll collect all this, we're doing this winter, and I'll pay you off next spring.
Mm.
I never got a penny out of it.
You never got a penny? Oh, jeez.
Worked all winter for nothing.
I just don't know how we could have possibly lived with just Wayne's income, and then
I tell you, it was pretty tough living.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, we didn't require a lot.
We didn't.
We ate pretty plain food.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't remember ever being hungry.
No, I don't think we were ever hungry. Obviously, I was quite chubby.
I
But
think that was nothing but baby fat, though.
yeah,
I think all girls go through that, don't they?
I think so. Yeah, but I
But you
was,
can look at the pictures like with you and Nancy and
we were all
Donna Val.
chubby.
Yeah, you're all look
Yeah.
very similar.
Yeah, yeah. Mm. But you know, the cost for,
And we always had a lot of moose meat.
yeah, that's true. Yeah,
Mm.
and we grew our own potatoes. We
Mm.
were never hungry, but stuff like clothes and shoes and
Yeah.
coats
A
and
lot of hand-me-downs.
yeah, yeah, just to survive. Yeah, hand-me-downs.
Then the next winter in the Nail Chicks, when I got a job with HEA, they were extending the line. The line at that time went from Homer and it ended at Clam Gulch. And I went up and checked with, I heard they were hiring. They needed help, and I said they were hiring, so I went up and on my job and run down the superintendent. Devers was his name. And he says, asked him if he had a job. I said, I'd sure like to get a job and work with you guys. He says, can you climb a pole? I said, sure, I can climb a pole. Well, be here Monday morning, 8 o'clock. And start at, what, $3 an hour or something?
Oh
like
my
that.
gosh.
That was good money.
Yeah.
When you haven't got any.
Now you start at $30 an hour.
So on the way home then, I stopped in at Clam Gulch. Per Osmer had a store at Clam Gulch that was sort of a, I don't know, kind of a junkyard, I guess. Anyhow, he had climbing gear there, military climbing gear. I bought a set of climbing hooks and a belt. And I think I had to give $5 for the things, which I didn't really have to spare. And I come home and I couldn't find this pole around there to practice on. Well, I did find a little yard pole. I'd go up and down that thing a few times. I thought, oh, this is a piece of cake, you know. So I showed up there Monday morning, and I can go this day and show you the first pole I climbed.
I'll be darned.
And going up was no problem. I didn't have any problem doing the job, but coming down was a little tricky.
Yeah. Well, what did you do when you got up the pole? I mean, you had to learn how to use a hot stick and
No, this is all coal construction.
all cold construction. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, no, I would never
Just
have
trial and error, huh? Learn on the job.
learned on the job as it went.
Wow.
And actually, I was eager to learn too. I learned how to sag the wires. The engineers would tell you how much sag was supposed to be between a certain length of span, and we just climb up one pole and measure with a tape measure so many far. It's supposed to be 40-inch sag in this span, so we'd drive tack a lath on the pole 40 inches from the top and go down to the pole next to it and do the same thing. Then they'd put the wire over the insulators between the poles, and you could sight it. And you'd tell them to tighten it up a little more.
Uh-huh.
And there was some guys down there in the truck and the winch, and he'd keep winching it up till it got to 40 inches, and he said, stop it.
I'll be
We
darned.
just tie them on the insulator then. I tell you, that was quite an education.
So you were part of building the line from Clam Gulch to Kenai, connecting it to Kenai?
Yeah. We went to the end of Sterling, went up to Sterling, hooked onto the, Kenai had their own power company there.
Right, KCL.
And we went and hooked on the end of their line.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times we parallel their lines.
Yeah.
Their construction did not meet REA standards, so most of the time we'd have to build new line where theirs were.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this was all done, I remember most of that was done in the wintertime. It was a cold winter too.
Well, you also helped put in the line to the homestead, didn't you?
Yeah. That Keith and I and Unky, Chunk Unky,
Unky, I remember Unky.
we took on the job ourselves. We all decided that, and Rabic, well, everybody that lived up there was
Yeah.
involved. But in order to in order to get power, they wanted first year minimum in advance. I don't know how they figured it. Anyhow, we had to come up with, I don't know, $500 or $600 for before they'd even consider building the line, you know. So we worked out a deal with them. We will clear all the right-of-ways for our minimum. So we didn't have to come up with no cash.
Oh.
And Keith and I and Unky and Ravik, day after day we'd go down and, of course, the engineers would come through and they'd stake out the line. And we went through and cleared all the right-of-way. Chainsaws,
Mostly
axes, alders and
What? Alders.
some trees.
And some trees, yeah. Yeah.
Then when we got it all cleared out and we were ready to start construction, well then I got a job as lineman. So that
Cool.
brought us some money in too.
Yeah. Now this was so between when you first worked for HEA and did that climb gulch at Sterling.
Now this is after all that.
Yeah, you'd done that first and then you quit and then they
Yeah.
rehired you
Yeah.
to come on and
And then
So you worked for them
after
two
that,
times.
well, I stayed on then as maintenance at Homer.
oh,
I worked for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years.
yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Right there in the shop?
Well, the whole area.
Yeah. As a maintenance person?
As a line maintenance.
As a lineman?
As a lineman.
Yeah.
And we'd have to, I know every year there were quite a few poles that the frost would push on the ground, you know. And we'd take the digger truck out and we'd drill holes down beside the pole and drill under the pole and put the winch on it, pull it back down the ground where they're supposed to be and back and pull again.
I remember a few stories you've told in the past. Fred Hatfield was your foreman?
Dwayne Belknap was our foreman.
Oh, Dwayne Belknap?
Fred Hatfield and I were both linemen together. Jim Straub was one of the grunts, and Joe Morowitz was another grunt.
I'll be darned.
Yeah.
Son of a gun. Now, you got burned one time, didn't you?
Yeah, that's when I finally quit.
Oh.
Right down, I don't know what it's called. We're right on the corner of HEA and Pioneer Avenue, that street.
Lake Street?
Lake Street. Used to be a market there, Ketchinak
Catch my food cash.
Food Cash,
Mhm.
yeah. And right behind that was a power pole, and the power come over the hill down into town, and it come down this Lake Street to the substation back at HEA. And somebody had shot out an insulator on that pole, and it was leaking. And we had just got a new hot stick trailer, a little red trailer, just full of all kinds of hot sticks, you know. And Belknap says, when we had this broken insulator, he says, well, we got a chore this afternoon. He says, we're going to try out our new hot sticks. And it was just he and I and Fred. The three of us was all that was involved. And so Fred and I went up the pole, and Belknap was on the ground. He was grunting for us. And we had no problem. We got the hot wire. We jacked it up, tied it off, and the wire was way up above us. We took the insulator off. We broke the insulator off and put a new one on. And lowered the hot wire back onto the insulator and pulled it down tight so it was sturdy, safe. And then we had to tie it on with aluminum tie wire. I remember I was working as a C3 pole, had 2 insulators on it, double cross
arm?
C3, is that what it's called? No, I don't know.
Something like that.
Anyhow, I got mine tied on my side, and Fred was having trouble getting his tight. He couldn't get the wire tight, and it was quitting time, 5 o'clock. Belknap was getting impatient down there, you know. And finally, he lost his patience. He put on his gear and he'd come up the pole and he says, I got to show you everything, Fred. Fred was kind of a slow learner, you know.
Yeah.
Once he got it, I mean, he's a good guy.
Yeah.
He just had trouble with new stuff. So anyhow, Belknap come up to show Fred exactly how to do this. And I was on the pole too. I was underneath Fred. And Belknap was underneath me. And he took my hot stick. He was trying to point out to Fred, do this, 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 and this, you know. And Fred would go around the thing with his hot stick. He'd pull it up tight, cinch the wire down. And as he did that, well, Belknap leaned out to make sure everything was all right. He had one foot on the pole, leaning way out. And Fred jerked his wire, gave the pole a shake, and Belknap lost his balance a little bit. So he reached over and grabbed my belt to steady himself, which threw me off balance. So I reached for the pole, and my thumb hit the metal cross-arm brace just as Fred brushed the other end of it with that hot wire.
Oh, ow.
And it burned a hole in my thumb and side and come out my hook in my leg and knocked me out.
Yeah.
I couldn't fall because Belknap was belted off under me. But I don't know how they ever finally got the wire. I guess Fred finally got the wire tied up. 'Cause they had to help me down.
Did they take you to the hospital or?
No.
No.
Belknap would get below me and he'd take one foot and jam my hook in a pole. And Fred was right opposite me and he'd slide my belt down a little bit and then Belknap jabbed the other hook in the pole.
Are you unconscious?
Just about.
Yeah.
I was coming to then.
Yeah.
And they finally got me on the ground and I was able to move around a little bit. And we didn't dare report it because, see, Belknap did everything wrong.
Yeah.
You should never, there should always be a guy on the ground watching you, you know.
Should not have been 3 men on that pole.
And there should not have been 3 men on the pole
Yeah.
and nobody on the ground below
Yeah,
us.
and nobody on the
watching.
ground.
So everything was all goofed up.
Yeah.
And actually, I couldn't come back to work for, I think, 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And what happened, what bothered me the most was I lost control of my bowels. I had to wear a diaper.
Oh gosh.
I couldn't control anything. You know. I guess I was just lucky to be alive.
Yeah, and especially since you didn't go to the doctor to, you know, I don't know that a doctor could have helped you, but you couldn't afford it anyway. But
no.
Wow. So after that, it was like, okay, I'm out of here.
Well, after that, I was too cautious to be any good on hot work.
Yeah, you were scared.
I was so aware of that hot wire all the time that I wouldn't.
Yeah.
And by being extra cautious and afraid like that, I could kill my partner too.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I said, well, I'll keep working until you can find a replacement. But I says, no more hot work for me. And I don't know, a month or so later, they come up with a replacement, and I just quit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I figured I'd use my chances.
Yeah. Now, we were living at the homestead at this
Yeah,
time?
yeah. I was commuting back and forth every day.
Yeah.
I'd drive of course, then the road ended up at Muse.
Yeah.
And I'd park my car there, and then I had Skeeter tied up there, and I'd ride him back home.
Yeah, Skeeter.
That was a long ride all day.
Oh, my.